Well, someone asked a boy, "What's so special about Mother's Day?" The boy retorted, saying that it's a day when mothers are treated like queens, they get a break from cooking, daily chores, and dad take the family to a restaurant. The mother also received gifts, many gifts. Then he was asked again, "What's so special about Father's Day?" To which the boy replied, "It's a day when dad drives the family to his favorite restaurant and ends up paying the bill." I don't know how far that's true for most of you. Well, the feelings surrounding Father's Day are varied. For some, we recall the man who couldn't be there when we needed him. For some, it stimulates feelings of gratitude as we honor the Father, the times we had or we have with our fathers by our side. For some, there are some who never knew the Father. For some have lost the Father. Regardless of our own individual story, we are all reminded how important fatherhood is, how lives are forged through the guidance of a man older and wiser. I hear many of us speak about father, and in doing so, you are talking of the legacy that he left behind, that he left you with, or the legacy that a father, your father, my father, is building. Recently, the church that I grew up in, the senior pastor passed away, and it came to the church as a great shock, a very young man, a very dynamic man, a man with so much patience, a man so calm. And on the day of his funeral, his son stood there, just about 10 years old, and he talked about my father's love. He stood there as a testimony of his father's life. He stood there and he talked about his father, how he shaped him, how he guided his family, how he took care of the family, never raised his voice. He said when he left for Delhi for his checkup, this is what his father said: "You need to be strong. You need to trust in the Lord no matter what happens." And I think that is also the reason he stood there boldly as a testimony of his father's life. And I also happened to come across a father who couldn't provide guidance to his family. His son passed away when he was just in his 20s because of his addiction. And later, his father passed away because of his addiction. As I was preparing for this message, I was just thinking, how many of us, including me as well, would have the courage, the boldness to stand and be a testimony to our father's life. Proverbs is the quintessential book of wisdom in the Hebrew Bible, traditionally attributed to Solomon. A proverb by its very nature conveys distilled wisdom, and Proverbs 27 is no exception. It's a very short and simple passage, but packed with powerful truth. In just a single line, it draws a powerful connection between personal righteousness and generational blessings. I want to ask this question to every one of us. What is legacy according to you? What is legacy according to you? The dictionary defines it as the inheritance left to someone in a will, the long-lasting impact of a particular event, action that took place in the past of a person's life. The Bible talks about legacy, the enduring impact of one's life, particularly through the transmission of faith, values, and wisdom to the future generation. Everyone leaves a legacy, good or bad. Everyone builds a legacy, good or bad. The Bible is full of fathers who impacted generation through their walk with God. And also there are some who could not. In Proverbs 27, we are interconnected ideas, the righteous man walking in integrity, and the blessing extended to his children. The verse begins by emphasizing the character of the righteous man, which brings to my first point. A father who walks in righteousness. The Hebrew term tzaddik, often translated righteous or just, denotes someone who aligned their life with God's standard. And in Proverbs, it is characterized by integrity in speech, honest dealing in commerce. The Bible is full of fathers who impacted generation with their walks with God. And this afternoon, one such character I want to bring to our attention is King David. King David. He is one such example, even though he was not perfect, yet he was called a man after God's own heart. David was not a perfect man. He was flawed, at times failed greatly, yet sought to live justly and in repentance. His repentance modeled humility. David was a worshiper, and that can be seen in the book of Psalms. He modeled a deep relationship with God, rooted in obedience and worship. His life is marked with both success and failures, also demonstrates a pursuit of God's will and an attempt to live righteously. His legacy, including his son, can be seen as an example of a righteous life, how a righteous life can influence subsequent generation. 2.2, a father who walks in integrity and faithfulness. What is integrity or what is faithfulness? Integrity, it means being whole, undivided. It's doing what is right even no one is watching. What is faithfulness? When a man walked before the Lord, they model covenant faithfulness with God. The children witnessing this pattern begin with an advantage. They have seen the firsthand the blessing that flows by honoring God. David was not perfect, but he was honest before God. His integrity was shown when he humbled himself and sought restoration. He did not hide his failures, but confessed and turned back to God. Integrity does not mean perfection, but being honest, owning mistakes, and modeling repentance. As David neared the end of his life, which we see in 1 Kings 2, he left behind something more valuable than riches or a kingdom, and that is legacy of integrity and faith. A legacy of faithfulness to God. He did not pass only the throne, but a covenant relationship with God. David did not just talk about success, but he pointed to the source. When we read 1 Kings 2:3, this is what David said to Solomon: Observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him. He did not say to Solomon, build armies or gather wealth, but walk with God. And which brings to my third and last point. A father leaves a blessing. A father leaves a blessing. My dad, he grew up as an orphan. He lost his dad when he was very young. He came with his father in search of a suitable land where he can build a place, where they can build a place of their own. But unfortunately, when my dad was very young, his father passed away. My dad, he had no place to go. He was left standing alone and was brought up by his foster parents. And when his dad died, he was left with nothing, my dad. His early life was filled with so much of guilt, unforgiveness towards his stepmom and relatives who did not even make an effort to find him. He was left with no inheritance. He was left with no godly principles or values, and which may be the reason we were not fortunate enough to be raised with the godly principles, and to which it affected our family, the family that I grew up in. I was brought up from a very dysfunctional family, where staying home was not pleasant at all. I grew up envying fathers who would go to church with their families and who would always guide their family with godly principles. I saw how my family was broken and was in mess. There was no peace, no joy. But in his later life, my father, when he gave his life to the Lord, to God, there was so much difference. That was a time, his turning point in his life. There were times when he was astray, and us, we hesitated so much to even follow him, or to even trust him. I used to curse my dad like anything, because I had so much hate for my dad for the way he lived. But now I also realized, he had no one that could leave him with godly principles to guide his family. Every parent tries to leave an inheritance or to build an inheritance for the future generation, so that the children, they have a good life. There's no parents that would want their children to suffer. From Abraham onwards, God's promises frequently carried an intergenerational focus. I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offsprings after you, Genesis 17:9, by linking father righteousness to the blessing of their generation. Proverbs 27 echoes the idea that godly living has ripple effect beyond one's own soul. King David's own work of parenting was a mixed bag, but what he did for Solomon in 1 Kings set the foundation of many years of remarkably successful reign. Much of the good of Solomon's life and reign connects to the principle of his father, principles that he gave to him in 1 Kings 2. David reminded Solomon of God's covenant. If his descendants were faithful, they would always sit on the throne. A father's faithfulness paved path for his children. A life of righteousness and integrity becomes a foundation blessing. David did not just pass the throne, but a covenant relationship with God. God honored David's faithfulness by blessing his lineage. 1 Kings 11:13. His obedience and heart for God brought lasting favor to his descendants. God blessed the lineage of David primarily through a covenant promising an everlasting throne and a descendant who would rule forever. The blessing extended to the promise of a Messiah. David's blessing to Solomon was filled with wisdom, courage, and spiritual instructions. 1 Kings 2. He charged his son walk faithfully with God, giving him a foundation not just for rulership, but for a righteous living. Proverbs 27 stands as a concise yet profound reminder that holiness is never wholly private. The righteous lay a foundation upon which the next generation can build. In the fractured world, where family structures sometimes falter, and where many long for a sense of belonging, Proverbs 27 beckons us back to the simple yet sacramental reality that everyday choices matter. To all the fathers here, your consistent pursuit and honesty, prayer, and life of godliness is more than a private devotion. It is a legacy gift to your children, to the teacher, mentor, or a spiritual parent modeling integrity and reverence for God. You leave a spiritual inheritance that echoes for decades to the child. Even if you did not grow up in a blameless household, Scriptures still calls you to pursue righteousness today. By God's grace, you can break the destructive cycles and build a legacy of spiritual inheritance. To all the fathers, you have a powerful impact. I look up to my father a lot. And we look up to all the fathers. You have a very powerful impact. They don't just leave behind the possessions, but principles. The greatest legacy you pass as a father is not only your inheritance, but it is the spiritual heritage that you give to your children, desiring them to walk in the way of the Lord. A legacy of godliness, a legacy of integrity, and faithfulness. I want to conclude with this question to all the fathers. What is the legacy that you are creating? And what is the legacy that you want to live in life? As a father, as a husband. Billy Graham said, fathers are the most unsung, unnoticed, and unpraised, yet a very valuable assets to the society and the family. To the others who are present here this afternoon, as we celebrate this Father's Day, let us also not forget to honor fathers for all that they do well and for trying. And let us also show grace and forgiveness for the times they failed. Let me pray.